Hi, good evening, viewers. Welcome to another edition of Northeast Today live session. It's really nice to see some of our brethren, how far they've made it in the field of academics. And today, one of our guest for today is a professor from IIT Mumbai, and he is Raile Rocky Ziipao, and from Parul village, Manipur. So let us welcome him. Hi, Zipa.
Hi, Mittal. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really sorry. I this Purul village, I somehow tend to always pronounce as Parul. So
Not an issue, not an issue.
okay. So how was your day?
So far, not bad. Good, going okay.
Okay, okay. So Zipao, before we begin with our conversation today, I wanted to ask you, like, if you could introduce yourself to our viewers and tell them something about you, your family, and about you growing up and everything.
Well, I'm honored to be here, and thank you, Metro, and to your entire team at the Northeast today. And my dear viewers, good evening. I was born and raised in a village called Puru, locally known as Hamaiki, located in Sanapati district, Manipur. I belong to my Naga tribe, which is constitutionally recognized as scheduled tribe. I grew up in a big family with eight
Uh-huh.
siblings. So for us,
Okay.
every meal we eat together looks like a celebration. Currently, I teach at Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Unfortunately, I am the first tribal professor at IIT Bombay, and I hope many of our viewers will come and join me one day.
Definitely. Uh, you- when I first heard that I have to interview you, so it was we felt so proud. Okay, somebody has made it so far, and it's really impressive. And we are so honored to have you in our show. And I had this certain image, the typical stereotyped image. So I thought I'll see a professor with a suit and this neat haircut, and now I see now I see this dreads and all. It's really cool. I mean, not the it's like unconventional. So you've always had it because I saw your pictures on FB, with the locks. I think you had it almost for a long time, right?
Well, yeah, that's kind of image how people see most, in a way that in the academia, when you're in institutions, when you're in a university, you're expecting, or I expect that someone with a bit decent look, or, people do not expect to see with a professor who has a drag log and walk into your classroom. It's, I think, kind of bit radical in nature, but nevertheless, I always wanted to get my hair dreadlocks, and this is
Hmm.
my second dreadlock. 6 years back, I had my
Hmm.
first dreadlock, and this is my
Uh-huh.
second. Yeah.
Really nice. It's really cool. I mean, I think a lot of people have this. It's having a dreadlock is in their wish list, but somehow they don't do it, including me. And you inspire me. Apart from your academic qualification, I mean, the dreadlocks too. I would like to have them too someday.
Well, I can help you all in that.
Yeah. You can share the address, like wherever you got it done from. Hmm.
Sure, sure.
So, Zipao, tell us something more about you. We know you as the professor now. You're popular, especially in the Northeast, as the assistant professor from IIT Mumbai and from Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. But what are your other interest areas?
Well, yeah, of course, my primary research interest is on tribes and also sociology of infrastructure and the border aspects. And recently, I started exploring on digital exclusions. Besides academia, I like to explore rural villages. So whenever
Mm-hmm,
I get time, I would escape the metropolitan city and go to small villages, and
mm-hmm,
especially in my hometown, in my home village in the countryside, where I like interacting with the elders, the villagers, and help out to some extent in the party field, in the farm, whatever is possible. That way, it makes me sort of connects to the roots, and also learning about folk tales and folk songs. Of course, I'm not a singer as such, but it's always good. Always learn something, and you have a close in sort of what is called the intrinsic connections with the nature as such. So I really like exploring rural India.
Yeah, I mean, I saw most of your when I had to read about you, and especially in Facebook, in Instagram accounts, I saw a lot of pictures from villages and you farming, and I think there's a video of you like in a bike. Would it be okay if I showed it to our viewers? I think you're going
Sure,
somewhere. Maybe I'd like to ask you. Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, those were two of the videos that I see. Is the boundary area that Myanmar you were talking about?
Yes, that is on my way to Indo-Myanmar border during my field work. So when
Okay.
we plan to do a field work, we realized that the roads are not motorable. So there is no way we can take a four-wheeler. So the only
Uh-huh.
options left was to go by bike. So I went with my director, and we stayed there in the
Mm-hmm.
village, the Pangsha village in Nagaland, which is bordering to India,
Right.
Myanmar. And on our
Mm-hmm.
way again, there was a landslide. So we have to
Okay.
wait the lens, to get it clear and pass through. So it was a very difficult field work. Nevertheless, it was
Mm-hmm.
worth traveling to that extent and knowing the people out there in the border village.
Mm-hmm. There's also a picture of you. There's a technical team. Can you show me that picture with the trucks and all? And there's a little boy out there. So I just wanted to ask you about that picture too, because I was wondering, like, because you had sent me this one and I couldn't really understand why was this picture shown. I mean, because I was asking pictures of you.
I see. Okay. This is, in fact, a very interesting picture. This
Uh-huh.
also during one of my journey from Dimapur to Imphal. I wanted to have a
Mm-hmm.
first-hand experience of
Mm-hmm.
life in the truck. So I was doing the field work and traveling on this truck. On the way,
Mm-hmm.
we stopped because we were not
Okay.
allowed to enter this Kohima and has to wait, and there were no hotels, nowhere where we can eat food. Hence,
Mm-hmm.
the helper of this truck started cooking food for us. So this
Okay.
striking image, how the daily life of those people who play daily on the national highway, and my objective also to see about the types of illegal taxations taking place, that kind of very taxes imposed
Mm-hmm.
all
Mm-hmm.
transportation of the goods. I wanted to experience that, and I happened to take this picture. Yeah.
So you're saying you are in one of those trucks out there?
Yes, I was traveling that truck.
Okay, okay. So, like, you had to travel in the truck for many days?
I traveled for 14 hours from Dimapur to Imphal, and trying to
Okay.
note down what are the different checkposts, how many checkposts are there, what are the
Mm-hmm.
different mode of taxations, be it state as well as
Mm-hmm.
non-state actors, and also
Mm-hmm.
to estimate why is the material like places in Manipur is very expensive as compared
Mm-hmm.
to other parts of the country. Of course, this is part of my research project on infrastructure.
Oh, I see. So, what were the observations you made?
The observation is quite striking. In fact, say
Uh-huh.
for instance, a bag of cement in Delhi say costs 100 rupees. By the
Mm-hmm.
time it reach Imphal or Manipur, it will cost double the amount. So there was a calculation which came out very, very, very interesting calculation by the NEC. Say, for instance, if the cost of construction is 100 rupees in Assam, it will cost 150 rupees in Nagaland and 200 rupees in Manipur. And the goes in
Okay.
Arunachal, another 170 rupees. So why? Because the transportation cost in our side is quite high. And one of the essential reasons for this high transportation is boils down to infrastructure. And not only
Right.
that, there are varied forms of taxes being imposed upon, on the highway.
True, true. I mean, especially during blockades and all, out here too, in like the interior villages. I mean, even a packet of salt goes up to 300 rupees or Maggie and everything. And everything, like you said, boils down to infrastructure, lack of roads and connectivity. So it increases the prices. And I also wanted to know a little about your book, the one you have, your latest book, Infrastructure
Okay.
of Injustice. So, can you
Uh-huh.
tell our viewers a little about it?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, my book examines the concepts of infrastructure of injustice,
Mm-hmm,
infrastructural injustice, and
mm-hmm,
infrastructure deficit in these conflict-ridden states of Manipur, focusing
mm-hmm.
especially on roads and electricity. So,
Right.
drawing from my ethnography study of these processes, my
Mm-hmm,
analysis gives primacy to infrastructure within the development discourse. And I argues that infrastructure development has always been an
mm-hmm,
egg of power, which at
mm-hmm,
different time has been leveraged for and against communities. So, will
mm-hmm,
its open relationship connects people, enable trade, and dilute boundaries between varied ethnic groups? Infrastructure
mm-hmm.
also rigidifies boundaries, rupture
Right.
relationships, hinders
Mm-hmm,
trade and commerce, and disconnects people. I observe that infrastructure built out in regions like
mm-hmm.
Northeast is
Right.
near in a binary space of military versus civil infrastructure, valley versus
Mm-hmm,
hill, tribal versus
mm-hmm,
non-tribal areas, centered versus
mm-hmm.
alternative center, and so on. So these
Yes.
polarizations of this binary space is the key to the question of justice in terms of
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure distribution and investment. Hence, the
Right.
notions of infrastructure of injustice cannot be generalized and applied across the region and state. So the poverty of infrastructure or crumbling of infrastructure is mostly seen and experienced in tribal or hill areas, alternative centers. So if we look at about the comparison between, say, infrastructure in Guwahati and with that of some remote villages in Nagaland or in Manipur, there is a sharp difference. So also when one compare the infrastructure facilities like Imphal and that of Sanapati district, the district which I belongs to, there is also sharp difference. So I brings out the core relations of ethnicity, infrastructure, and also the politics of development.
Okay. So, but why do you think there's a problem in the infrastructure? Do you hold anyone accountable for this?
Well, there are multiple factors wherein we are experiencing a crumbling of infrastructure, particularly in a tribal areas or in a hilly
Mm-hmm,
terrain or in a difficult geographical areas. The first aspect which one can look is on the concept of this budgetary discriminations. How much
okay.
money is being allocated to certain district? Say, for instance, the government of Manipur clearly comes up with the two different budgetary allocations. One is for valley,
Mm-hmm,
and other is for the
mm-hmm.
hilly terrains. So when one
Yes.
compares those two aspects, there's a sharp difference. So that is one of the factor which I call it structural inequality in terms of the power structure. And towards the
Mm-hmm,
end of the day, it also boils down to about the power structure. Who gets represented? Whose voice get heard? And development
mm-hmm,
for whom? Where should one build those infrastructure? Say places like Northeast, where this private investment is at a nascent stage. So the
mm-hmm,
role of the state becomes crucial, and it is the state which is leading in terms of this infrastructure development. And more so, creations of infrastructure without maintenance becomes a liability rather than an asset. And the other factors, as you can also see, the corruptions, of course, is common, the other things, and then taxations.
Mm-hmm.
And more so, say for instance, if there's a budget allocation of one particular project of 1 crore, hardly 50 crores get implemented. So there is also a gap in terms of implementations, and also varied taxations being imposed. And partly the community are also responsible. Till today, we have not seen the sense of where we take the ownerships of such infrastructure. Sometimes we say, okay, this is government school. Okay, these are government will do. Sometimes we tend to blame that all the stuff as well. There are also those factors which also contribute to the crumbling of infrastructure. But basically, say for instance, in a village, even though it's a remote, that doesn't mean that the village should be disconnected. But one could lay a road, if there is also a political will. So
So you
those
think
are
it's lack of political will and
there is
lack
so
of accountability by the citizens too? I mean,
yes, lack of accountability, lack of political will, and also in northeast many states like in Manipur and Nagaland, there is also the political issues.
yeah, I mean, like the simple things that we read sometimes is like the roads when like you said, like maintenance is another issue. It's like just building roads, like making roads, and then there's no maintenance is another issue. And then there are already better materials available to make them, and somehow still the redundant practices of the yesteryears are still being used, and that it often makes me wonder why is that. Like, is it corruption or is it just I don't know, lack of, like you said, political will and lack of accountability, that they just want doing the things that are no more that are obsolete to today's need. And
Yeah.
right,
Yes, please.
please go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was trying to bring out the what in fact, I echo to what you say. Say, for
Mhm,
instance, in many states in northeast, including Manipur
mhm.
and Nagaland, there's a very interesting concepts came out by this Northeastern Council, which is called the orphanage roads. So the roads which have been
Oh,
abandoned. So
okay,
that is
nice.
the government. In fact, this is a government documents which has been documented in that way, the orphanage road.
Hmm.
So, like I pointed out, in fact, the creations of infrastructure without maintenance becomes a liabilities rather than an asset. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, there are also other factors. The conflict within the community, or that also create an issue. And the conflict, at say for instance, even ethnic conflict, that also has an implication or ramifications on building infrastructure.
Right, right. So, what do you think is the solution? Have you is does your book provide any solution that to it?
Well, to some extent, I kind of argued development, the concept
Hmm.
of development with justice, in
Okay,
the sense
as
that
in.
where we can also address the historical injustice mattered to certain communities, one can look forward, deepening of infrastructure. In
Hmm.
fact, I was invited by this Niti Ayog
Hmm.
on this sustainable development goal on 2020. It was organized by Niti Ayog, Tata Trust, UNDP, Government of Assam, wherein I argued that one way forward to deepen this
Hmm.
critical infrastructure like roads, electricity is as such that we can come up something with what is called Northeast infrastructure missions, wherein
Hmm.
all the centrally funded infrastructure projects can be routed through this Northeast infrastructure missions. Otherwise, there is
Hmm.
also a lot of gap in terms of implementation, and also
Hmm.
taking into consideration of the people as a whole, as a large, taking
Hmm.
having trust on the people, being people
Hmm.
become the make the part of the stakeholder of that such project. That could be one
Hmm.
way forward. Yeah.
Right, right. I agree with you, Zipao. And okay, just a sec. Um, so you have also worked on a journal back in 2018 concerning the Act East policy. So can you tell our viewers a little about uh, Dil, give a little details about it.
Sure, sure, absolutely. In fact, I published a paper called Egg East, also Look
Mm-hmm,
slash Egg East Policy,
mm-hmm,
wherein I argued a certain infrastructural project bypasses the local economy and local people.
mm-hmm,
Say, for instance, roads. When such infrastructure bypasses local economy or local people, that
mm-hmm.
amounts to infrastructure of also injustice. So
Oh,
for
so
me,
beautifully said. Yeah,
okay, so one way
yeah.
forward to deepen one aspect is that I argue in this paper is building on basic infrastructure, connecting rural infrastructure and rural people to regional, national, and international market.
So why is that? Since the government and all, what they do is they do it with some certain planning, and if the reason was some communities are getting left behind, there must be a reason. So how would you counter that? Because they don't just go about making plans like just like excluding communities. I mean, if need be, and like if the situation calls for, then that's what they do. But then, like, how would you justify that? Sometimes it's not possible to include all, right?
Well, yes, this is something which is famously discussed in the philosophy, what is called this utilitarian principle, in the sense that
Yes,
it's
yes.
okay if common, like say 80% of the people get benefits, it's okay to leave behind the 20%. But if we look in the context of India, we are a welfare state. So even
Hmm.
those 20% of the population also matter. That's where all the concept of justice and injustice, discrimination all stems into up. So, being a welfare state, one should also take account. One should also, what the way with the state, the government also talks about what is called inclusive development, sustainable development, good governance. You know what? All thing that becomes a buzzword. So
Yeah.
here, as much as those 80% of the population also matters, even the 20% of the people also matter in when it comes to about the development. So what we see today is that this current framework of infrastructure development, in fact, has been conceived from the statist perspective, thus widening the gap between state and society. So I argue in my paper that addressing the issue of your relating to insurgency, basic infrastructure, political negotiation, and various ethnic communities, integration of the local economy, improving land connectivity across the border, strengthening the existing institutions in place, and increasing border trade might be a way forward when we look about this egg east policy. Earlier it was known as this look east policy, now it's
Look.
been
Yeah.
rechristened as egg east policy. So in the paper, I also analyzed the relevance of the policy. How is it grounded in the complex region of Northeast India? In what way can it impact the region? So taking that aspect of building infrastructure became an imperative to deepen the egg east policy. And yet, as I pointed out, let me repeat that I argue that the new national road infrastructure project bypassed the local economy and posits the need to link rural infrastructure, especially connectivity and local market, irrespective of whether they are just 10% or 20%.
I agree too. I mean, very, very beautifully put in that India is a welfarist state, so we need to look after the people. I mean, like you said, 10 or 20% rehab and resettlement, or providing with them with alternative when they have lost their source of livelihood. I mean, it's the government's responsibility. It's also something related to conscience too. I mean, there has to be some alternative provided. I mean, development does have its consequences, but then what is development if we are leaving behind our brothers and sisters, and few of them are just progressing? So
Exactly.
it's a very good thought. And yeah, those who are going to gain out of it, I think they are also not asking to gain at the expense of the other. So it may take time, but then I think people can wait for it too. And like you said, the infrastructure also, I mean, just sometimes it crosses my mind, like, northeast, we have like really, really small roads. and then with increasing vehicles and traffic, uh, I don't know if it's like in between those, they have this barricades in between the roads, like
Dividers.
between two, yeah, yeah, dividers, yeah, yeah. I don't understand. Like sometimes they put like tree plantation and all. It beautifies the town. It looks good. But when we have such small roads and there's hardly any space, I mean, why not use it like in for in between for the bikers and the two wheelers? Because they are, and then sometimes the justification what I get to hear from the others is because our people are like hooligans. They are not ready. They'll not be able to. There'll be accidents. But I don't agree with it because people are actually, I mean, the two wheelers are already, they have made the way, so it's without mentioning it also, they are they move in between the vehicles, like you're getting it right. So it's like it's already, so that space could have been more used for traveling, and instead it's been used for something else, like those trees and all, which is very good, but then I think the need is for wider space. But anyways,
I
um
echo your point. Yes, I agree. I agree.
right, right. So, you're also a member of Tribal Intellectual Collective India. So, how
Mhm.
do you find communication out there, right there? I mean, like, what is? Can you tell us about it? Like, what do you all plan? What do you all discuss? And does it have any utility? And have you all been able to make any like collective change?
Well, tribal intellectual collective is a very safe space, where we share knowledge and respect each other positionality. We are, in
Mm-hmm,
fact, being mentored by senior scholars such as Professor Virginis Kaka, Professor Bipin Jojo, Professor Bodhi, Professor Alex, and so on. So we are not here. What we're trying to say is that we are not a mere recipient of knowledge, but we're attempting to partake in the very knowledge production itself. So, for Tribal Intellectual Collective India, contextualizations is a process of methodological perceptions in the process of knowledge production, wherein how can we create our own mirror to look at our
mm-hmm,
own reality. Often what happens is when I read certain things, I comes to now about my community reality, my tribe's reality, or my tribe from someone else's perspective. So here we are trying to posit an alternative ways of trying to understand our tribal society. And if we look at about, concerning about the tribal studies in India, one can broadly map out three perspective. Of course, the two dominant, what is called the perspective from above, stemming from
mm-hmm,
those of the Western and the Brahminical perspective. The second
right.
is what is called perspective from below, stemming from the subaltern studies. So we at the
Mm-hmm,
tribal intellectual collective, we say that we are neither from above nor from below. Why can't we also
mm-hmm,
position ourselves something, perspective from within, wherein we try to understand our society in a
mm-hmm.
totality, or in to give us epistemological to produce in the knowledge productions, to be part of that knowledge productions and create our own mirror.
Right. And you have also extensively discussed about tribals and Adivasi, the difference in reference to Northeast. Can you explain a little about it?
Well, this is indeed a very interesting questions on the category
Uh-huh.
of tribes and Adivasi. So there
Mm-hmm.
are a few concepts we need to unravel before we come to the differences. So a tribe is a sociological concept, whereas scheduled tribe is a politico-administrative concept or category. So there are tribes such as like the Santals, Oron, Mundad, and others listed as scheduled tribe in one state, but not
Mm-hmm.
listed in another state. Say
Mm-hmm.
Assam is a good example to this. So in
Mm-hmm.
India, tribes are also called as Adivasi in the indigenous
Mm-hmm.
people. On the context of the category of tribes and Adivasi, I echo to what Bodhisankuppa Rani has theorized. That is,
Mm-hmm.
in geographical areas where tribal
Mm-hmm.
communities experience greater degree of peripheralizations, the struggle
Mm-hmm.
is often posited around a category of resistance such as Adivasi or indigenous
Mm-hmm.
people. So in whereas in places where community or communities have a greater control over their polity, the category tribes often use. Here, the power relations becomes an important aspect. So if we look in Northeast, often let's say Pumai Naga, Mao, Kuki, they would prefer to
Mhm,
use as tribes. So it
mhm,
echoes to the greater controls also
mhm,
about the resources and the polity. So that is the basic difference, and I very well echo to what Bodhisankar Rani posited.
mhm. And also, I don't know if you're talking about this book, the Bodhi essay called Land, Words, and Resilient Culture, the Ontological Basis of Tribal Identity. Is this the book?
This is the book which I edited with Bodhi, but Bodhi was talking on
Mm-hmm.
another book which he has published, and there was a
Okay.
recently a special issue on social
Mhm.
actions. So that is the paper,
Okay.
that is the journal where he posited that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And the one that I'm talking about, lands, words, and resilient cultures. So,
Mhm.
can you give us a little detail about it?
Okay, sure. So in this edited book, we argue that
Mm-hmm.
land is the key to unraveling our tribal reality. Say, tribal connections to their historical lands, where their
Mm-hmm.
ancestors inhabit, whether they
Mm-hmm.
currently inhabit or have moved away to other places, still
Mm-hmm.
constitute the bedrock of their identity. The
Right.
way they conceive themselves is so much dependent on their need to identify with their lands. So the land
Mm-hmm.
often it's been the foundational basis. It's been conceived as alive. The words and language manifesting from land is dynamic and alive. Say the
Mm-hmm.
language, culture, and tradition manifesting from land are dynamic and alive. Territory which is generally holistic. Say constitute hills, rivers, natural and mineral resources, air, water, and people who firstly inhabit it. So each of these processes is conceived fundamentally as
Mm-hmm.
sublime living entities,
Mm-hmm.
all alive, dynamic, and changing. So, in the
Mm-hmm.
contemporary Northeast, we echo this various political movement that revolves around land and territory. Like in the questions of Naga is one of the pointer indicator. So, this is the focus where we take land as the key to unraveling, to understanding our being, the very existence of our being as well.
Wow. I think those are like really in-depth, something you really need to think so I was wondering if these books are available online.
Yes, it's available. It's available
So,
online.
okay. So, where do they, I mean, do you, like Amazon and all, or is there some website?
So, one thing, this is the book which is we publish it with along with Tribal Intellectual Collective. For us, we
Mm-hmm.
believe that knowledge should be accessible. So it's in Google. Anybody can download
Oh,
it.
that's awesome. That's so nice. So I hope my viewers, those who are keen on understanding and reading extensively, it's on Google. So you can just, it's as simple, it's just a mouse click away. So, um, Zipao, like as an assistant professor, you've been working for so many years now. Uh, you, when you teach your students, what do you think is something what would you wish out of your students and something you feel it's lacking, like from your generation as a student yourself, and now when you see the children, you must be seeing a lot of difference. So can you tell us a little about it too?
Well, yeah, teaching is always a two-ways interaction, like rather than just one-way traffic. So as an
Uh-huh.
instructor, we also grow along with our students, and it is important that we respect each other's space and intellectual
Mm-hmm.
capabilities. So
Mm-hmm.
gone were the days where rote learning is the thing, but that is
Mm-hmm.
not longer the case today. So hence, conceptual clarity becomes the key to learning, unlearning, and also relearning. So for me, when I take a class, I emphasize on explaining those concepts and how those concepts and theories we can connect and to understand our society better. That is the key
Mm-hmm.
emphasis which I also focus. And nowadays, students are of course really smart. They, in terms of technology, they outsmart many of us. So
Mm-hmm.
especially in this online teaching mode, there are also challenges where students are super smart. But I think what is important for us to note is not just one way interactions, or the
Mm-hmm.
teachers, the professors come into the class, give lecture non-stop for 1 hour. That
Mm-hmm.
I do myself to find is so boring. So how do
Yeah.
we engage our
Yeah.
students and also we
Mm-hmm.
grow together? I think that is the essence when it comes to teaching. I'm still
I
trying to figure out, and now I'm also still new to the system, trying to figure out and how to go about and learn and also unlearn my many other things.
So how is the response of the students? Are they cooperative or like you said, they're very active and you need to stay updated. So like, how do you manage?
Well, it also differs from place to place. For instance, when I
Mm-hmm.
was in Tata Institute of Social Sciences or Central University of Punjab, or when I was in Jamia Millia Islamia, the
Mm-hmm.
classroom size, the student number of students is pretty small. But as I moved to IIT Bombay, I have class where there are more than 300 students. So it becomes a big responsibility. How do you manage all the 300 students? And also to keep engage all the 300 students becomes a big challenge. So in a smaller
Good.
classroom, we can also have an eye contact and interaction and body language. It's kind of how they're responsive. Or we can also run some quiz, ask some questions, whether they get it or not. But it becomes quite challenging when a classroom is large. So especially in this online mode, at times one feel that you're just talking to your computer. And at
Right.
time, because of the network, one might get disconnected. So there was one case wherein I didn't realize that I was disconnected and I went on for 10 minutes just talking to myself. So there's a lot of challenges. But in terms of the response from the students, so far I'm enjoying it. The way they pose questions, something which are so fundamental, something which are so simple from the instructor point of view, but it is not so in the case of the learners, from the students. They are so curious, especially these engineering students. When I teach these BTech students, you say, sir, why is there a social movement? For instance, why is there environmental movement? So I take the example from our own backyard in IIT Bombay. We had this power lake,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of erosions, the destructions in the biodiversity. So I try to connect that to their reality, which they are also, being part of that whole larger ecosystems. So some questions are quite interesting and that keep us engaged, and also we enjoy teaching in that.
Yeah, and sometimes the most simple questions are the hardest to answer.
Exactly, exactly.
Yes. I have this video of you. I think you're teaching some of your students. I'm not aware if it's in IIT Mumbai or somewhere else, but after watching the video, maybe you can tell us a little about it.
Sure, sure, sure. Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to discuss tribal studies in India, particularly pre and post Kaka framework. According to 2011 census, 705 individual communities have been enumerated as scheduled tribes in India, and the population stood at 104 million people, which constitute 8.6% of total population in India. Bodhi posits that till about 1990s and early 2000, tribal and Adivasi studies were going through an interregnum crisis, as in the old is refusing to disappear and the new is yet to come. However, in this theoretically saturated domain, there is a minor rupture in theoretical discourse, particularly on tribal studies in India, in the form of pre and post Kaka framework. In pre Kaka, the concept of post colonialism and the experience of a post colonial reality across the society is taking place, and they study more from the evolutionary perspective rather than that of the historical perspective. However, in post-Kaka framework, it argues that there is a waves of colonialism layered upon tribal communities in India. And Kaka argued that there are double form of colonialism taking place. Well, yeah,
Where would that be?
that was a lecture where I gave in Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Nagaland campus. It's in a village called
Okay.
Chutuim village in Mokochun district.
All right. Uh-huh.
There I have a small class in the sense there are only 20 of them. So we
Okay.
were discussing on the very category of tribes. Tribes as a noun caste society. Tribes different
Mm-hmm.
from that of the caste, pervasive caste society. So that is the thing where I was trying to explain and the kind of framework. How do one approach about tribal studies? Yeah.
Then, like, normally, like tribes are like equivalent of non-caste. But then, I'm sure you are aware that there are some tribes in the Northeast that do have a caste system. So that's kind of unique, right?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I have not come across. Of course, there is also lots of assimilations taking place. If we look in other parts of the country, some tribal society have been assimilated to the caste society. That is no doubt is
Mm-hmm.
taking place. But the beauty, one thing which about tribes, as there is not like say hierarchically order. So that's why we positions that tribe as a noun caste society. Without tribe
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have the element of the features of that of the caste systems, wherein one has been divided into Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishyas, and whatnot. And there's no as such on discrimination based on one's own birth. So of no doubt about it, even the tribal society are no doubt about it, there are also discrimination take place. But discrimination is not based on about one's birth by birth. So that's why we say
Yeah.
that we argue that tribes not a part of the caste systems.
Right. I don't know. I am aware of some tribes in Arunachal like that, but I wouldn't know if you would term that as caste system, or it's like a different order of hierarchy or ranking. I think more studies need to be done on that too. It would be really interesting. And since you are from the Department of Humanities and Social Science, I think that would really interest you. I
Absolutely.
can share you some books.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. I look forward to
Yeah,
reading
yeah.
those. Yes, that would be great.
Right. So, like coming back to you, Zipao, like you had, I wanted to ask you this, that you had made through this Raghunathan Family Fellow, Harvard University. Uh, it's so awesome and it's so cool. I mean, it must have been like really, really ecstatic moment for you. So can you tell us a little about it? How did you apply and the whole experience that you like, went through?
Well, I think I was one of the fortunate first generation scholar who access to higher education,
Mm-hmm.
and like it was in fact a totally different, altogether different experience going all the way to Harvard and the academic environment there at Harvard University, and coming as I does from a village, in a poor village, and of course I've been exposed to the places like Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So what really
Mm-hmm.
happened was that I started working at Jamia Millia Islamia for a few months,
Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for a postdoc opportunity wherein I
Mm-hmm.
can also get some time to work on my manuscript for my book. That's where I start exploring, and I apply to this Harvard University. And one of the criteria in that Harvard Raghunathan Family Fellow is assessed that the candidate has to be
Mm-hmm.
a recent graduate who has not
Okay.
been exposed much. So that is also one, it work on my advantage. And they also
Mm-hmm.
look on the project which you are trying to do. They don't
Mm-hmm.
allow for any kind of field work. That is the space you come there, spend 1 year, you spend 1 year in theorizing and also attend lectures, attend classes. So I was given a full-fledged fellowships there that
Mm-hmm.
enables me to be there for 1 whole year and attended many classes, attended many seminar, and also interacted with well-known scholars. For instance, I
Mm-hmm.
got to meet Professor James Scott, who wrote a book, The Art of Not
Wow.
Being Governed. He is
Mm-hmm.
based in Yale University. So I went all the way because Boston is not far from Yale University, and also the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities where you get delivered a lecture at Harvard University. I also managed got opportunity to deliver at Brown University, Harvard University, share my experiences, attend classes at the Harvard Kennedy School, where all the top intellectuals comes and partake in that knowledge productions. And so their approach in that way, they're very, very approachable. So
Mm-hmm.
that gave us a space, that's a difference between in terms of education when it comes to many of the Indian systems.
Wow. It's a lifetime experience, right?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. And I also wanted to ask about this that since you're interacting with children all the time, and because of the high competitive society that we live in today, and the stress that children have to go through, how important is mental health?
Well, mental health is not my domain. Nevertheless,
Mm-hmm.
mental health is, I think, a serious issue, and many take it for granted because there are various forms of mental health that stems from multiple factors. So the
Mm-hmm.
consequences of, say, even poor connectivity infrastructure can result into mental health for many. So when students are not able to log in during the online classes, that can also result into traumatized experience. And many, as I say, take it for granted. We don't know at the in the early stage that led to traumatizing more aspects. So I think we also really need to pay attention to this mental well-being besides
Mm-hmm.
other material needs.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry, but I'm not an expert on this domain, though. I just sharing my
No, no,
opinion.
no. That's all right. Perfectly all right. It's just basic. I mean, because you must be seeing when you interact with your students, you must be seeing some of them like really stressed out. And these days, I mean, students, I mean, tend to like be very emotionally vulnerable also because of the high rate of competition.
Exactly.
And yeah, coming to your book, the picture that I can see, Infrastructure of Injustice. The other one. Can you show the Infrastructure of Injustice? The other one. Yeah. Not this one. I saw a pole, like a electric pole, that's crooked, and
Oh yes.
this one. I found that quite interesting because for a cover, like book cover, like you chose that of all the pictures, and I just wanted to always ask you why.
Well, for my book, the one
Mm-hmm.
which is white in color is the international editions. So there, I don't have
Okay.
any say. So it is the
Okay.
publisher who decide the design everything. But for
Mm-hmm.
South Asia editions, they gave me the options to put up any photo. So that is
Mm-hmm.
the photo you see one bending electric pole which is bending. That
Mm-hmm.
photo I took on my way to my village. So often I
Mm-hmm.
comes across this electric pole and till today is tending with bending forward. And when I was talking about the infrastructure of injustice, that kind of illuminate me, capture the
Haha.
essence of what I'm trying to convey to my readers.
Right.
So that
That's
is also one
uh,
form where one can see this also been injustice been done to that aspect. So that has been line, for instance, when that if that electric pole falls, there can be a lot of like consequences. But it's still there and nobody pay heaps of it attentions to that.
I hope I can maybe take a selfie near that pole someday and say, "Hey, Professor Ziipao, like, see, I made it here," kind of thing. Oh, that's quite risky, yeah. It's like high time it's fixed.
Exactly.
Uh, so, Professor, how can you were talking about sustainable goals, and in sustainable goals, like one of the important one of the what to say pointers is about quality education. So do you think in Northeast, like by 2030, like we can expect some dramatic changes?
I hope so, and I'll be really proud if there's something can be done when it comes to sustainable development goal. Say, for instance, say those 17 goals, no zero poverty, zero
Uh-huh.
hunger, good
Yeah.
health and well-being, quality
Mm-hmm.
education, gender equality, clean water and sanitations. Those are the things, which has been presented, and it's so appealing for us to
Mm-hmm.
take it. So I look
Mm-hmm.
forward where these 17 sustainable development goals deepens in Northeast India. But here, I think we need to also understand that sustainable development is a
Mm-hmm.
process
Mm-hmm.
rather than an outcome. And
Mm-hmm.
us, you must be well aware that there are indeed multiple policies and programs, such as Sustainable
Mm-hmm.
Development Goal 2030, Northeast
Mm-hmm.
Vision 2020, Digital
Mm-hmm.
Northeast 2022, and among others. So I
Mm-hmm.
was, in fact, told you that I was invited for the Northeast Conclave on Sustainable Development agenda wherein I
Mm-hmm.
are pursued that we need to really deepen on this critical infrastructure. Say, for instance, you talks about this quality educations.
Mm-hmm.
If there are no proper roads that connect to the village, it becomes impediments for people to access that. And of course, there are also some schools with a classroom. So can we
Mm-hmm.
really talk of this quality education without this basic infrastructure? I think that becomes imperative. Invest
Mm-hmm.
in and building on education or health, and also on infrastructure. I think it need to go together.
I
So
agree
I
with you.
hope so in the sustainable development goals to some extent. It's deep in the Northeast India. And recently there was a report which has been released, district indicators, when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
SDG 2030.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So any something that you took note of in that district indicator?
Well, what strikes me or what is interesting aspect is that, say, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
UNDP's Sustainable Development Goal has like 13 goals, and there are
Mm-hmm.
169 different indicators.
Mm-hmm.
So what the Niti Aayog is trying to do is the localizations of Sustainable Development Goal. And they comes up
Mm-hmm.
with more than 200 indicators to measure what has been the level, how far we have achieved. Say, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, how do you measure this quality educations? How do you
Mm-hmm.
measure like zero hunger or like no poverty? So that becomes, it gives us the indicator wherein one can improve upon. One can look where are the aspects where one need to focus. So that indicators, in fact, helps to understand. But if we go purely, reduce everything to measurement, I think we
Mm-hmm.
lose the sense of the other things, the subjective experience of the people, and how do one captures the subjective experience? Say, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
when one talks about development, often been look from the point of the per capita income. But the per capita income is the average. That doesn't really tell about the incomes of one particular one villager in the rural areas or in the hill areas. No doubt about is those indicators are important, but we also need to deepen that and take into the consideration of the well-being of the people as well, making people at the center.
Happiness of the people,
Yes. So, for
right?
instance,
The
happiness
indicator. Yes. Yes. Uh, since you said mentioned about localization of indicators, and government has been doing a lot also, and it also reminds me about the national education policy. Like 34 years later, they intend to reform, and there's also this point like Bhasha schools, the
Mhm.
emphasis on Bhasha schools. Like if you've read about it, I just want what's your take on it? Because I was kind of confused. So how does this apply to Northeast? When they are focusing on regional languages, so there are so many, like in a place like Arunachal, there are like 26 major tribes and 50 sub tribes, and then there are so many tribes without a written script, and they it's in dialect. So how will this new national education policy apply here? I mean, like I don't get it when it comes to Bhasha.
Well, to be honest, I have not done a critical reading on this NEP 2020. But
Mm-hmm,
nevertheless, as you have pointed out in terms of the language, I think that can be
mm-hmm,
a bit debatable issues.
mm-hmm,
Like what you rightly pointed out. What about those societies who has only, who don't have a written records? or whose histories are more of in the oral, which language do you follow?
Exactly.
Do we need to have 20 different language in terms of the instructions? And is this applicable only to the government run schools or also to the private school? And compare those, say one government run school with that of the international schools. So that language also becomes very tricky. And given
Mhm.
about, the multiple ethnic groups, multiple tribes. So as you rightly pointed out,
Exactly.
there are a number of tribes in Arunachal. So which language one use to for instructions? So
Exactly.
here,
And they might, right. Yes, please
yes,
go
yes.
ahead. Yes. And here,
And yeah, oh yeah, sorry, I was trying to.
that's
I
all
was I did
right.
something. I was lost somewhere. So can you please carry on? Yeah.
My fault. My fault. I cut you off.
No,
I'm
no, no,
really
not at all.
sorry. They,
Not at all problem.
uh, then they might justify that, like they might say, okay, for then in instances like this, they might say like then we'll use Hindi. But then again, the whole it defies the whole attempt. Like they want especially in primary schools, they want the children to like study in their regional language. It's also like preserve their language and culture. Second thing is again like uh, they want to promote and they want not because a lot of children these days are not speaking in their mother tongue anymore, so that's also like for preservation and conservation whatever. But then if we go again to Hindi again, that defies the whole process. So I'm kind of like so confused about this whole thing. I read a bit about it, and also what's your take on this one? Also I wanted to know, because now previously to get an honors degree we had just 3 years. Now it's been now it's in 4 years, and now there's also the liberty that like if I'm doing honors and then like I don't want to complete my 4 years and I just want to wrap up my education in 2 years time, so that will become like vocational. I'll get a vocational certificate still. But earlier, it never used to happen like that. It sounds nice and very positive and very flexible. So, what's your take on it, Professor?
Well, as I've said that I've not really looked critical reading aspects, but my
Mm-hmm,
apprehension is that how do one operationalize such policy when it comes to implementation level? Say, for instance, when one looks about this higher education, so in
mm-hmm,
NAP they're going to scrap these MPhil programs, and there also might be where they reduce the MA to a 1 year and increase for BA from 3 years to 4 years.
mm-hmm.
I hope that the government is on the positive side, and also of course, we do need a new education policy. But will this new education policy address the persistent issues when we look about it to bring about the change in our education systems? I hope this NAP addresses that.
Yeah, likewise, likewise. Last time we had a reform, it was in 1986. So now we have it in 2020. So hopefully it's implemented and it's not just like theory. Theory. So okay, the next question that I would like to ask is about the um okay, that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, I have seen that some comments, technical team, I did see some comments flashing. So is the comments there? You can, Professor, would you like to take the comments right now?
Of course, sure, sure, it'll be.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, but like I said, it's you don't have to always fit in that stereotype. So seeing someone in such a different avatar, it's really nice.
Thank you, Mr. Pooh, for encouragement. Okay, Moy. Okay, thank you. All the
Looks
electrical
like that only.
looks like that only. Oh, thank you for echoing my experience. Yes, Mr. Apau, that electric pole is still there. Okay, Mosby. Rocky in Latin means pathfinders, whereas in Urdu it means the first one to blow the trophy. I don't know what is it. Thank you, Willupoti. Talking about this social media, okay, where do we get these books and how? For my book, unfortunately, it's not made free of cost. It's published by Routledge and it's available on Amazon. Whereas books which we publish under this Tribal Intellectual Collective India are all available online if you can Google
Mhm.
search. Talking about this social media, recently there was something called on the Twitter storms on this not like something on include
Yeah,
chapter
like
of
inclusion.
NCERT.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask you, what's your take on it? Inclusion of Northeast history in the NCERT books in CBSE, ICSE.
I have this slightly different opinion when it comes to that. Of course, it's a very noble initiative, like to
Mm-hmm.
print or to put in about Northeast India to NCERT. And here
Mm-hmm.
we also, of course, I think we really need to problematize the very category of Northeast because Northeast is not an homogeneous category. The
Mm-hmm.
northeast of the region was, of course, formalized as a political entity with the enactment of what is called this Northeastern Council Act in 1971. And this was taken further by the government of India with the establishment of what is called this separate ministry, or Ministry of Donor. So, for instance, Sikkim was part of Northeast India only in 2002. So, no doubt
Mm-hmm.
there are some cross-cutting issues of Northeastern state, but this
Mm-hmm.
does not make it as a homogeneous category. So, this kind of political issue, you say, stemming from Manipur is very different from that of Meghalaya, Mizoram, and vice versa. So, if we look deeper and take the case of tribes, there are also sharp
Mm-hmm.
differences of tribes in all
Mm-hmm.
the northeastern states, as you also rightly pointed out. So, attempting to understand the root cause of any issue in the region, either at the policy level or through theoretical discourse, by
Mm-hmm.
treating the category Northeast as a whole is futile, given that the issues are multi layer and multi dimensional. So, here we need to contextualize. For me, more than just a mere inclusions of chapter of Northeast into NCERT,
Mm-hmm.
epistemological integration precedes the others.
Mm-hmm.
In the book where I edited with Bodhi, we argue that epistemology is fundamental to tribal being.
Mm-hmm.
When they seek from the state, sorry, what they seek from the state is not about emotional, psychological, political, or even historiographical integration, but epistemological integrations. In fact, Bodhi beautifully capture what this
Mm-hmm.
is epistemological integration about. He explained that this is to be understood as a search for recognitions and respect for the
Mm-hmm.
totality of a community's being, which includes a theoretical acceptance of its history, a legal recognition of its habitat, and social respect of its culture and political willingness to see and treat the community as equal and self-determining. Of course, no doubt about it, this is a novel initiative to include a chapter. But what chapter do we include? And also,
Mm-hmm.
if our very existence, if our very being, if our very culture is not being recognized, the whole questions comes down to about existence. So here one might face about the existence crisis and the denial of agencies to certain communities. So
So you would be okay if the Northeast history is included in the NCRTs, if all the tribes and like the all the differences and like all the what do you say, all different tribes and different states are like properly demarcated and the details about them is given. Would that be fine?
well, I'm not very sure whether the NCRT would have that space to include that, you know. So that's why I wanted to try to problematize the very category of notice. because Northeast Assam is not a homogeneous category. And if we were to take more than 215 different ethnic groups, I think we
Mhm.
need a whole course on Northeast.
Oh yeah, the whole course on Northeast would be good, but it's just that the students would be so angry that include another whole burden. But then, no, no, I'm glad that like somebody today is talking not just about the Twitter storm on Northeast inclusion, but the next step ahead: who do we include and what do we include, right? This is the first time I heard someone speak differently about it. It's something to think about. I liked it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, some of the comments are still there.
Mhm.
Mao, yeah,
Okay.
Frankie.
Frank is in Manipur,
Okay,
majority is mighty. Okay.
what do you say about them? What do you say about Manipuri being separate power between hill and valley?
Well, thank you for your question, Frankie. I'm from Manipur. Well, this I echo your questions in the positions where you could also come from. There is no doubt about it that there is a structural inequality when it comes to Manipur. Look at about the political representations. In a 60 assembly constituency, my tribals represent only 19, whereas other communities represent 40, 40. So here, just take one simple example of development, or say that local MLA development fund. If we divide that 90 versus the others, that gives a sharp difference. So here, when the movement, and of course, like no doubt about it, I acknowledge that Manipur is in fact a very complicated state. There is a course cutting issues. I am well aware of such complications. But here, what is important to note also when it comes to the binary between hills and valley, so that becomes the key to understand the social reality in the context of Manipur. Which community dominates whom? Where are the fundings going on? So in the recently concluded assembly, one MLA from tribal area from Tangul, he pointed out that out of 700 crores has been spent, only 100 crores been spent on the hill areas, whereas the others is on on the valley. So one can always talk about, that's what I was one thing talking about, these budgetary discriminations. When tribes in one way are asserting for greater political autonomy, one can also reflect on how has been the response of the state vis-a-vis the dominant community. Say, for instance, one example, tribes are asserting for sixth schedule status. But how long that has been pending, without operationalizing? Of course, otherwise there is a constitutional provisions. But how does one get interpreted? I think these are all the larger questions we need to ask when we see about the binary between the hills and valley and also the power relations. And another crucial example, I talk some my favorite topic is on infrastructure. Where are all those infrastructure located? Look about the central university. Look about the sports complex. Looks about the hospitals. Where are it all located? I think it's common. Anybody gaze, can make where are these facilities are located, and accessibility for the people from hill areas becomes problematic or become challenging. And one of the reason why I wrote a book on infrastructure of injustice is obviously because of that reasons. When I go to other parts of the country, I don't see that much of difference because I've traveled in many roads which are not motorable in hill areas. So why is that? Where is that stemming from? That is the central question I just asked. And of course, that became my book.
Yeah, which is available on Amazon, so you can read them. You can buy them and read. And maybe, yeah, he's from Manipur, right? So he can get a sign also, like his
Yes.
autograph, right? So, Frankie, I hope he has answered your question. And if there's anything more, you can ask us. Wow, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Ilo.
He's your student?
Yes, he's when I was in Nagaland. Yes.
Oh, so sweet.
Okay, there is a questions on how do I pronounce Lakoi. Any tips for publication in research journal? Well, a quick tips to publish is start writing.
That's super quick.
Otherwise, what we can go on to take another lecture on on publications.
Yeah, maybe like you can start your class lectures here in Northeast Civilized session itself for greater accessibility to all. We will be the freeloaders who will be taking the free classes.
What a privilege. Okay, this must be okay. I think you absolutely have a chance to raise the questions, which you just did it. Okay,
Yeah, even
Rola.
I loved it. The orphanage route. It sounds so. It makes it sounds good. A bit good in a like it makes perfect sense.
Oh, thank you so
Oh,
much,
so
Mr.
sweet,
Jimmy.
so sweet.
Okay, well, I absolutely agree, Gustav. Gustav Dekat, nice to see you. We were colleagues together at Jamia Millia Islamia for a few months, Gustav Dekat.
Oh, hi, Christoph, sir. Thank you for watching our show. Well, sir, my final question to you would be, what would your advice to our viewers uh, who are watching us today be?
Well, I don't have an advice as such that because I struggle myself. But if I one way to look about is if we can create a space to learn, unlearn, and relearn and sort
Mhm,
out the conflict. I'm purely speaking on my experience. So I don't know if some of you echo this will be good, but then others,
mhm,
please just take it as a just suggestions because the kind of
mhm,
conflict within myself. So the conflict is like this: I, me, and myself. Sometimes I wanted to write, but me
mhm.
in me say you can do it tomorrow, and myself get mad at How do I resolve that?
Right, right.
So if one can resolve that issue, I think we are on the right spot.
Yes. So, now that we have come to the end of the program, it's been such an honor to have you here, and we would like to wrap up the show with the introduction video of you for our viewers. So, thank you so much for coming, sir. And I would really like you to stay till the intro video is over. It's been made with a lot of love and a lot of hard work, just for you especially, and for our viewers, of course. But then it's more for our guests,
Thank you so much. That's been so kind of you all. I'll be here. I'll be here. Absolutely.
right, sir?
It's
Right.
an honor being
Thank you.
here.
It's it's been a pleasure and an honor, sir.
Raile Rocky Ziipao is an assistant professor at the Indian Institute of Technology, Mumbai, Department of Humanities and of Social Science, and was earlier working as assistant professor with the Central University of Punjab, Bathinda, and also with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Guwahati, off-campus, Nagaland Regional Centre. In these universities and institutions, he has taught courses such as Indian society, structures and processes, sociological concepts, social exclusion and inclusive policies, economy, polity and governance, social exclusion and social policy, development, concept, theories, dimensions and strategies, and Introduction to Northeast India Studies. He was the 2017 to 2018 Raghunathan Family Fellow, South Asian Fellow at the Lakshmi Mittal South Asia Institute, Harvard University. He holds a postdoctorate from Harvard University, a Ph.D., MPhil and MA from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai, and BA from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Tiljapur, Maharashtra. His research interests include social anthropology of critical infrastructure, political economy of development, Northeast India studies, indigenous tribal epistemology, social policy, border towns, small towns and tribal towns, and infrastructural deficit areas, Himalayan, Highlanders, Chotanagpur and Islands. He is a member of Tribal Intellectual Collective India, TICI, which is a knowledge-producing community constituted by teachers and academics from various universities in India and across the globe who are engaged in tribal and Adivasi studies. Ziipao's work has been published in the Journal of South Asian Development, Asian Ethnicity, Strategic Analysis, Economic and Political Weekly, and in multiple edited book chapters. His recent book, Infrastructure of Injustice, State and Politics in Manipur and Northeast India, examines the concept of infrastructure of injustice, infrastructural injustice, and infrastructure deficit in the conflict-ridden state of Manipur, focusing especially on road and electricity. He has also edited a book with Bodhi SR, Land, Words and Resilient Culture, the Ontological Basis of Tribal Identity. This edited volume is an effort of TICI to articulate concrete tribal conditions in a very distinct subject domains: land, language and cultures. This is part of a series entitled Tribal and Adivasi Discourse, a project of the TICI to deassemble methodology, perspectives and theories concerning tribes Adivasis in India. This book attempts to unravel new dimensions in the debates on the subject. He has written many journal articles on topics such as politicizing roads in Manipur, frontier tribes and nation states, deepening critical infrastructure in Northeast India, Look Act East policy, roads not taken, issues, responses and consequences. Many awards, fellowships, JRF, SRF, scholarship and medal have been given to him, such as Young Faculty Award 2021, Raghunathan Family Fellow 2017, Harvard University, DAAD Fellow 2014, Institute of Ethnology, WWU, Germany, UGC JRF SRF 2011, Ministry of Education, Government of India. Top Class Merit Scholarships 2009, Ministry of Tribal Affairs, Government of India, MS Dosi Vakil Bronze Medal for securing third position in BA 2009. Raile is an upcoming intellect from the Northeast in the world of books, and we pride ourselves in youths as him creating hustle in silence, breaking barriers and mending fences of isolation from the Northeast to the other parts of the country and the world. Northeast Today pays tribute to the likes of Raile Rocky Ziipao.